Right now, the most important person in your entire family history is probably someone you never met. Not a warrior, not a king, not a great leader. An old woman standing in dust, digging for roots in the afternoon heat. That old woman is the reason you have a brain large enough to watch this video. That old woman is the reason human children take years to develop instead of months. That old woman may be the reason your species did not disappear 2 million years ago, and science has finally figured out exactly how. Here is the biological mystery that started everything. You live far too long, not you personally, your species. Humans live to 70, 80, 90 years old, but a human woman stops being able to have children at around 50. In almost every other species on Earth, this does not happen. Female chimpanzees can reproduce right up until they die. Female gorillas reproduce until the end. Think about what evolution actually does for a moment. Evolution favors traits that help a species reproduce. If you stop reproducing, evolution should stop caring about you. You should die when your reproductive years end. But you do not. You live for 30 or 40 more years after your last child. For decades, scientists had no good answer to why. Then, in 1997, anthropologist Kristen Hawkes went to Tanzania and watched something that changed everything. The Hadza people of northern Tanzania still live something close to the original human way of life. They hunt, they gather, they move across the landscape following food. Hawkes spent months recording exactly who was gathering food and how much each person gathered. Every day. She expected the data to confirm what everyone assumed, that the best gatherers were the strongest adults in their prime. What she found was completely different. The most productive gatherers in the entire group were not the young adults. They were the grandmothers. Old women past the age of reproduction. Women who went out further, stayed out longer, and came back with more food than anyone else, every single day. And what they did with that food was more important than how much they got. They fed the grandchildren. Their daughters were nursing new babies. The grandmothers were out digging tubers and roots. They carried the food back to the older children who could not yet feed themselves. They were bridging the gap, keeping the older children alive while the mother focused on the infant. Hawkes called this the grandmother hypothesis. And when she worked out the mathematics of what those grandmothers were actually doing, the numbers changed the entire story of human evolution. Here is what the grandmothers unlock. In most primates, a mother waits until her current child can feed itself before she has another baby. This takes years. Chimpanzee mothers space their births roughly 5 to 6 years apart, but a human mother with a grandmother nearby can have another baby much sooner. The grandmother covers the gap. She feeds the older child, she keeps them alive, so the mother can have a new infant in 2 to 3 years instead of 5 or 6. Same mother, same lifetime. Twice as many surviving children. That is not a small advantage. That is the kind of advantage that spreads through an entire species across tens of thousands of generations. Now run that process for 100,000 years. The groups with grandmothers had more children survive. Those children grew up and had their own grandmothers who also stayed alive past reproduction. The ability to live long after reproduction kept spreading through the population. And something else started happening. Something no one predicted. When children know a grandmother is nearby, they can afford to stay children longer. In most primates, the period between birth and independence is short. The child needs to feed itself as fast as possible. There is no safety net, but with a grandmother in the group, the child is protected longer, fed longer, taught longer, and a longer childhood is the most expensive and most powerful thing evolution ever produced. A longer childhood means more time for the brain to develop before the child has to survive alone. More time for learning, more time for play, more time for the connections that build language and memory and social intelligence to form completely. The human brain is not fully developed until roughly age 25. 25 years of childhood and adolescence that no other primate comes anywhere close to having. That extended development is where language came from, where complex thought came from, where art and planning and cooperation came from. The grandmother made it affordable. Here is the part that is genuinely hard to sit with. For most of human history, we have told the story of our evolution as a story about hunters, strong men, sharp weapons, dangerous territory mastered through courage. And hunting was real. It mattered. It contributed. But the mathematical analysis of what actually drove human population growth and human brain development points somewhere different. It points to an old woman with a digging stick, past her reproductive years, not physically dominant, not hunting dangerous animals, just working every day, carrying food to children who were not her own children, keeping them alive long enough to grow a brain that eventually built everything. The thing that separated humans from every other primate was not the strongest male. It was the presence of a woman with nothing left to gain reproductively who gave everything anyway. Now here is what that change eventually produced. A human brain that develops over 25 years instead of 5 produces language. Language produces stories. Stories produce culture. Culture produces farming. Farming produces cities. Cities produce writing. Writing produces science. Science produces medicine. Medicine keeps grandmothers alive longer, which produces more grandchildren who survive, which produces larger populations with more complex brains, which produces everything. The entire chain from roots in the dust to the civilization you were born into runs through one biological fact. Human children take too long to grow up to be raised by one person. The grandmother was the solution, not because evolution planned it, because the groups that had grandmothers around outcompeted the groups that did not, over and over and over across hundreds of thousands of years, until every human group on Earth had old women who stayed alive long past their last child. Not as a burden, as the most productive members of the entire group. The grandmother hypothesis is not proven beyond all debate. Hawkes published the original Hadza research and has built on it across multiple studies. Other researchers have built models that support it. Some scientists argue that male hunting and pair bonding between parents were the primary drivers of human brain growth. The debate continues, but the Hadza data is real and has been replicated. Grandmothers in foraging societies consistently show up as the most important food suppliers for children who cannot feed themselves. The mathematics of what happens to human birth spacing when older women are present in a group is consistent. The puzzle piece fits in a way that is very difficult to explain away. Go back to Tanzania, not 1997, 2 million years ago. A group moves across an ancient landscape. There is not enough food for the children to eat after the mother's milk runs out. The older children are not old enough to gather their own food yet. A woman, past her reproductive years, walks out into the landscape with a digging stick. She has no children left to protect, no genetic reason to work this hard, no future babies who will carry her genes forward. She just knows the children are hungry. She digs, she carries, she comes back. She does it again the next day. And the children who were fed by her survived to have children of their own. And their children's children survived, and their children's children's children survived. All the way to you. Think about your own grandmother for a moment. Maybe you knew her well. Maybe you never met her. Maybe she died before you were born. But she existed somewhere in your lineage in every generation between you and the first upright humans. There was a woman past her reproductive years who kept the children around her alive long enough to reach you. She did not know what she was doing to the future of the species. She just knew the children were hungry. Every language ever spoken, every piece of music ever made, every scientific discovery, every hospital, every book ever read by a brain complex enough to understand words. Every single one of those things traces back to old women who kept showing up, not despite being past their reproductive years. Because of it, evolution did not keep them alive out of kindness. Evolution kept them alive because the groups that had them were better at surviving. The post-reproductive woman became the most important survival advantage in human evolutionary history. She wore no armor. She carried no weapon. She asked for nothing in return. She just kept coming back with roots. And from those roots, everything, the brain that built every civilization you have ever read about, the language that let humans pass knowledge from one generation to the next, the extended childhood that produced complex thought, all of it paid for by an old woman in dust who never stopped working. That is not a small story. That is the story. Hit that like and subscribe button for more such videos.